Greetings, fellow tribe members. Rhadamant here. Thank you for tuning in to The Tribe Must Survive, Episode 2, Approaching Eclipse. So in Act 1, we have a tolerance change cost reduction, which means that if we are to try to raise our tolerance here, it costs less. It only costs 50 influence, whereas raising stability costs 100. So if you do want to raise tolerance, the first act is a really good time to do it. I will also mention that influence can be used to counteract tough or negative decisions. So sometimes having banked influence is nice because you might get met with a situation where there's two really negative outcomes, and then there's a third outcome which has you burn influence to avoid those negative consequences. If we take a look at our tribe members, apart from our, I believe this is our, apart from Parig, everyone is doing okay. There's a little bit of discontent here or there, as some of this is related to sleep needs or food needs, but not too bad. Let's run another ritual. And I can also just scan real quick to see if anyone has critically low spiritual or social needs, because that will turn them into, without spoiling anything, when you go critical, spiritual, or social, you are somewhat become an outcast. You are no longer, in some cases, a useful member of society, as you have broken, like a schism, with your tribe, which is why it's so important to manage. So some other options you could do. There is a fire radius here. So I can increase the size in which the fire burns, as you can see, raising it up, but it dramatically increases the wood cost. So it's something that I would say is ill-advised unless you know what you're doing. Tangerine, Kirksel, thank you for the resets. So we're sitting on a decent amount of wood and food. I am stockpiling stone. So one of the reasons why I'm stockpiling stone here is in Act 2, we will get access to the Tinkery, which is your research building. And each Tinkery costs 70 stone. So burning stone early on is a bad idea, because once you reach Act 2 and you want research points, you're going to need a whole lot of stone to build the Tinkeries. The fire adjust mechanic reminds you of Against the Storm? Yes, as it should. This game has a lot of mechanics like that. I would even say a lot of the decisions that you have to make are very reminiscent of Frostpunk as well. You know, where Frostpunk gives you two really hard choices, both of which are kind of negative. Or also this War of Mine, it kind of reminds me of that at times, or even Darkest Dungeon. The horror aesthetic and the sort of doom and gloom is very Darkest Dungeon-esque to me as well. So spiritual need is a little low. I do hope people start to attend these things. Like you, but you are joining a ritual, so that's good. Now, if you look at the terrain, there is a sort of a green and a brown. The brown is where, like, trees, except for around the stone mine, the brown is, like, roughly where trees would originally have been, more or less. So it gives you an idea of, like, where they will regrow, if you're curious. So the two people attending, one already has a ton of their spiritual need fulfilled, whereas the other was in a critical situation, as well as social need critical situation. And just had positive social interactions with people around them. So their social needs were met, and then at the end of this ritual, their spiritual needs should be met as well. Look at that wood. It has gone up. Now, one of the positive things about setting up beacons is if you have critical resources illuminated by beacons, it allows people to work throughout the night. So we know that there's hunting grounds up here. So if I set up a network of beacons that direction, it would allow my hunters to hunt around the clock, because the hunting grounds would become illuminated. The same is true of tree cutting. It's less useful for tree cutting, because once the trees are cut down, the beacon no longer really serves a purpose. But in a pinch, it can be pretty useful to illuminate trees so that your woodcutters don't stop working at night, if that becomes an issue. We have one unassigned tribe member. Let's go with lumber. Now there are crop farms and crop fields that I could build, but what I will say is, sitting on about 300 food, I don't feel the need to invest in that right now. So Sarcastic Turtle, you asked if I can sort by needs? I don't believe so. You can pan through their needs real quick. So if I'm trying to, for instance, figure out if anyone's starving, I can pan through this and see if anyone has a red all the way to the left, indicating that they're starving. So there are some people that are like hungry, like our Spirit Lodge worker is hungry. But I don't think there's a sort function yet. I will also mention that the game is under development still. So for instance, Children of the Mother, which is a third spiritual aspect, is coming soon, right? So there are pieces of the game that have yet to be revealed and are in development. Question for you guys. Should I set up beacons to the hunting grounds? Yes or no? So essentially what I'm asking is, should I spend stone, which is a finite resource, which you need a lot of later on, as I mentioned, unlocking the Tinkery? Should I spend that finite resource to illuminate to the north the hunting grounds? Do you think it's worth it or not? I'll leave that up to you. And my explorers now has explored about the same amount of the map as the hunters have. It's also worth mentioning that when I offer polls, I fully intend for you not to really know the ramifications of these things. I started the stream, can you move beacons? No. But you can build them and destroy them. No buildings can be moved. But you only get a third of the cost back. So it's expensive to do things like that. Oh, this is a good ritual. Lots of attendance. They're all going to have their sleep and food needs probably not met as a result of dancing throughout the night, but spiritual needs are important. There we go, 1.6. That's way more comfortable. So if I do the quick pan through all the members here, I can see that 2 have like lower spiritual needs that maybe a follow-up ritual can help fulfill if they're the attendees, which one of the 2 are. No, 2? Yep, both are. So it's worth mentioning that just because you run a really nice ritual with a lot of people attending and that number goes way up, that doesn't necessarily mean everyone's spiritual needs have been met. Just the ones in attendance. So it is a bit of a micromanagement here to to make sure they meet those needs, more so than food, which they just pick up from the granary, or sleep, which they just check into the tent. Speaking of tents, I need another one because we maxed out our population, and also I need more workplaces. So I'm going to set up additional lumber camps, one here and one here. There is a forestry mechanic, yes. All right, so you guys decided no hunting ground beacon. Got it. Save the stone. Are we saving all of our stone for the tinkery? A follow-up question that I'll offer slightly more time to vote on. So as a reminder, the tinkery is unlocked in Act 2, and it is essentially research points for technology. So tier 1 technologies to just cover. Lumber camp production time is reduced by 50% for sharper axes. Stone pit workers are increased by 1 each time, but there's 2 tiers of that. The tinkery is more efficient at getting research. There's 3 tiers of that. And then yellow and green medicine farm production time is reduced, and there's 3 tiers of that. So that is the first tier research that we will, and actually and in Act 2 we'll also benefit from the tier 2 research, but I'm not going to go into that yet until I hit Act 2. So let's take a look. One of our members is delirious again. Probably from a lack of sleep. Critical sleep needs not been met, which will get fulfilled once they sleep. So let's check in on Grego. Oh, that was the first one to immigrate once he manages to sleep. In fact, we can sort of stalk him. Oh, Grego is no longer delirious, but now Peora is, and as you can see, it's due to sleep need. So she is sleeping, and once she sleeps us off, he sleeps us off, the delirium goes away. So that's what I mean by a lot of these decisions are non-permanent. So here is our first random choice pull. And I'm going to read this before I pull for it. We find a dying stranger lying near our camp. Her tattered clothes are caked in mud, and the strange leather coverings around her feet are soaked red. In her hand, she grasps a small copper device completely alien to us. The woman barely has enough strength to speak. She asks us to carry on the lost knowledge she managed to gather at a great cost. Please, the builders, it cannot be lost. Not after everything. Judging by her shallow breaths, she won't have much time to share. So, we are able to unlock, we'll do 4 things here. I can ask about the copperworks, which building upgraded copper costs minus 20%. We can ask about research methods. Building upgrades research costs are reduced 15%. We can ask about building tools. Resources gained when destroying a building are increased to 50%, up from a third. Or we can also ask what happened to her. There's the choice, and I'll give you 30 seconds. And I am not going to weigh in. Not all of these choices are necessarily good ones. Not all of these choices are necessarily bad ones. In this instance, this is a random event that really, at least the 3 top options are all positives. They're all benefits. Sometimes you're given a choice between 2 negatives and you just have to pick one of the negatives. So this is not one such event. It looks like we're going to go with research methods by 1 vote. So if you take a look here, the amount of research it now takes, previously, for instance, for the lumber camp tree growth, it was 100 research, now it's 85. Or part tinkering was 200, now it's 170. So essentially unlocking research is now cheaper, and that can be reflected here in tribe. So if you click T or the tribe menu, we have ancient formulas. Building upgrade research cost reduction of 15%, as it is a passive. And this passive, most passives like this, unless they tell you it is timed, are permanent. So I will give you a for instance. You might get a choice of, I'm going to make something up, but you might get a choice of 10 people become more fearful by 20 points, or everyone in your tribe needs to sleep 15% longer. And if you pick the 20 people in your tribe, or 10 people in your tribe get more fearful by 20 points, they will stay more fearful by 20 points forever. That doesn't necessarily mean it's terrible. Like if you take a look at their fear here, you can have a lot of effects that reduce fear total. So for instance, if that happened to us, we could invest in tolerance, raising our tolerance up so that people become less fearful. There's ways to counteract fear, but just know that those selected few that end up with that negative keep that negative. It's not like fear that will go away. They will always have that looming on them. It's also a good point to ask, should we spend our influence to increase tolerance and reduce fear, or save it for later? Because we just hit 52, and 50 is the minimum. Spend it on tolerance or save it for later. And I did mention that in Act 1, increasing your tolerance is reduced by 50%, but that doesn't necessarily mean you need to do it. If we take a look at our tribe members, some tribe members, like Peirig or Hovuwo, would probably benefit from it, as their fear is high. And what happens once your fear hits the 60s, your person essentially has a crisis where they will only huddle around the fire, neglecting all their other needs until fear gets under control. How much longer is Act 1? At the end of every act, again, tiny spoiler, but not huge. At the end of every act, there is a crisis. And you get a new act at the end of the crisis. So if you take a look at this orange bar here, there are no crises incoming, which means there aren't any... I don't want to spoil how long an act is, because, you know, it kind of gives you the timeline for the entire game. But you can tell when crises are coming, because you get advance notice. And each chapter has a predetermined crisis. So, at least for now, maybe later on they'll add a variety. But at least for now, every Act 1 is the same crisis as every Act 2 is the same crisis. So that once you replay, you know what to expect. The intention of this game is that you fail many, many, many times in order to try to win. That's the sort of concept. That it's difficult enough that you learn by trial and error. So even knowing that the crises are coming doesn't necessarily mean that you can beat them. You would love to see me play this game solely on my judgment and choices. So that was actually polled ahead of time. I put up a poll on my YouTube community page, and there were 4 options. Minimal guidance, where I showcase the game as if I've never played it before, allowing you guys to stumble and fail through polling. A little guidance, explanation of the options for informed voting, a lot of guidance, essentially taking the reins when needed to avoid losing, and then almost completely guided, which is that I basically play meta, but do my best to avoid spoilers. And the majority of people actually voted for a little guidance. So I'm providing a little bit of guidance here, explaining the game mechanics, but not really telling you how to win necessarily. Because I think a huge part of this game is the trial and error, and I don't want to ruin that for you. Much the way that like a mystery theater type thing of like whodunit. If I like walk in and go, all right, the maid killed the butler, in the first minute, well, boom, there goes the big mystery, and it ruins for everyone. So it is really important to avoid those kind of spoilers for a game like this. Cheers. What I will also say is, having played this multiple times, I tried to strategically and tactically approach it different ways. But what I had found, for better or for worse, is that there's kind of there's more or less like one or two ways to win, and all the other ways to win are gambles. And I'm not going to tell you what they are, but in your trial and error, you will find that some things work well. And that's true of a lot of games like this, like Frostpunk or Darkest Dungeons or, you know, Against the Storm, or, you know, where there's sort of a meta, and adhering closer to the meta is going to increase your chance of victory, and varying further from the meta requires extra skill and micromanagement if you are to succeed. So let's do a little health check here. Looks like fear is down. Oh, whatever came of that last poll? The, should we spend our influence to increase tolerance? I actually missed it. I was distracted. What did we vote for? Yes or no? There was no poll. Okay. Here it is. There it is. Sorry about that. Should we spend it on tolerance or save it for later? I'm going to do... Okay. Just scanning through all the members as like a little mental health wellness check. Here we go. Let me hide the poll for a second. An eclipse will hit us in 5 days. Prepare. I can see you guys really haven't resolved that poll up there. Nice, neat tie. If we have to leave it to a coin, I will. So, you're free to be a tiebreaker if you haven't voted yet. I don't know if it influences you at all, but we do have an eclipse coming as a crisis event. And crisis events, generally speaking, again, very generally speaking, crisis events usually drive up fear, not discontent. Again, generally speaking, fear is driven from environmental factors, and discontent is driven from governance. And it looks like tolerance is one. So, discontent is more or less a summary of sleep, food, social, and spiritual needs. There can be some permanent modifiers. So in Act 1, there's content to be alive, which increases or decreases discontent. Whereas tolerance is a reaction to environments as a way to deal with fear. So it looks like you guys do want me to spend on tolerance. So what this will look like here is if we take a look at each individual member now, let's try to find a particularly fearful member. The tolerance that we just spent with our influence now counteracts their shocking past, 10 and negative 10, meaning that Puuo's fear will drop on average now, allowing them to become less fearful. So that is the benefit of increasing tolerance. Can you gain influence by decreasing tolerance or stability? So you gain influence by increasing control. As you can see, if you embrace the philosophy of control, it increases influence gain by 33%. If you decrease tolerance or decrease stability, you will have panic and riots. So at critical discontent, riots will occur, and at critical panic breaks out. So yes, you are able to reduce tolerance and stability, but I'm not exactly sure why you would do that. I might just be too inexperienced as a player to know whether or not purposefully inducing panic or riots has a benefit. But yeah, it's not something that's going to help you gain influence, in other words. In fact, influence is increased by time since the last riot, so if you have a lot of riots, your influence goes down anyway. So far as I know, we haven't actually lost anyone to the darkness, which is pretty good. Nobody has starved to death. All of our original members are alive, so looking pretty up. All things considered, looking pretty up. Raggles, thank you for the resub. It would make sense if you got extra influence if you did that. That would be like the Stellaris way, right? Oh, a new resource has been discovered near the camp. So this here is a place to collect yellow medicine. So again, a little reminder. Yellow medicine in this second tab here can be consumed for by your citizens to increase their productivity, or alternatively reserved for rituals. And when you run a ritual that uses yellow medicine, it will increase your Servants of the Shepherd progress. And then likewise, green medicine does the same thing for ritual progress, and consuming green medicine daily reduces fear. So if you are a very tolerant society with a very low fear, you don't really need to eat green medicine for for fear reduction. You can just spend it in the Spirit Lodge, where there's always probably a benefit to consuming some yellow medicine because it increases productivity. That's good for that, because if you consume green medicine and your fear is 0, cool, your fear is still 0. But yeah, there is a strategic source, and as you zoom out, you can see the yellow medicine icon there. Now, we had decided that I am saving the stone to unlock a tinkery, so I am not going to start harvesting that medicine now. We had pulled that I'm saving it for the tinkeries once I have access to the tinkeries. Just a quick scan. And pretty soon here on this bar, you will see the Eclipse coming. So it did warn us 5 days in advance if you saw the overlay tooltip. But this is only 1, 2, 3 days on that bar, kind of bleeding into the 4th day. All right, there we go. An Eclipse will hit us in 4 days. I think what I'm going to do here is change Puvuo's work. She's very fearful, as she has been working as our explorer, meaning that she's in the dark, somewhere scary regularly. Picking someone like Rhadamant, who has a fear of 0, would be a much better choice so that Puvuo doesn't have a crisis of faith. So now I've switched them around, so Rhadamant is now our explorer, so that Puvuo can recover. And that's one major way to manage fear. Generally speaking, hunters, because they have to venture out, and explorers, because they have to venture out, will typically be a little bit more fearful. Even lumber camp workers, because they do have to venture out into the dark. Eventually you get, like, crop farms and tinkeries, which are usually, you can place them around the fire. And the benefit of placing around the fire is the people that work there is a lot less fearful. So one way to manage fear is to just make sure that your most fearful people in your community, whether they have personality traits that drive up fear, or whether they just have a particularly high fear bar, they get swapped into workplaces that have them closer to the center of town. So another one, I bet if I check Rag and Crowhar here, Rag and Crowhar probably have very low fear numbers. Crowhar has a fear of 0, and Rag has a fear of 0. And the reason why I could make that prediction is they work in the stone pit, which is illuminated 24/7, 365 by the center fire. Meaning that they really don't have a lot of opportunities to gain fear because they're always close to home. So another thing that I could do is I move Puo. Puo here can move into the stone pit. So let's put her somewhere that is going to be beneficial for her mood. Knowing that we have an eclipse coming, there is really truly a benefit to this. Because once fear or discontent hits a fever pitch maximum, it can be very debilitating for the members that become fearful. So she was at 50, and then Prag here is at 36, so we'll also put Prag here as the other stonecutter. If I can find him. There he is. And that will help to manage their fear levels. It's very easy to go through this game without this granular level of micromanagement. But what I will say is, if you don't do this kind of granular level micromanagement, you will lose. Plain and simple. So you're welcome to try, but I am warning you. It's hard enough that you will just simply lose. It's tempting to play on 4x speed and to race through, but yeah. Another thing to note, see this 17 over here? Eclipse, sun no longer rises. Prepare for dark times, where the shadow will devour the tribe. That is incoming. Ooh, this is going to be a good ritual. There's a lot of people in attendance. Unfortunately, those that are in attendance are not the spiritually needy of the group. I wanted Puo to join, but she's sleeping. She's the only one with low spirit needs, I think. So I'll have to not run another ritual when she is up and ready. But I'll check again in about a day to see if those fear numbers have been positively affected. There we go. Whoa is now joining the ritual. Perfect. It's exactly who I wanted there. But just a quick checkup. It hasn't been very long, but of course her fear has dropped 4 points already, and then the other person's fear has dropped 4 points as well. Okay, we do have some unemployed members. So it's going to be really difficult to hunt during the eclipse because the animals are outside of our light radius. So I'm going to employ these new people as hunters to try to stockpile food. This is a pretty good amount of food. And worst case scenario, if we really need to hunt during the eclipse, I can always end up reneging on my plan to not build a beacon up north and just build one anyway, you know, if it's needed. I'd also really like to discover where green mushrooms are, but that's just chance. The maps, if you're wondering, are procedurally generated. So each time you play, each time you end run or abandon, as you can see, there is no... It's Iron Man. You can save and quit. The game auto-saves every 5 days, so technically it's not truly Iron Man. You can set up in the options menu, which I do find weird. There's no options menu here. So if you wanted to change the volume of the game, you actually have to save and quit, go back to the menu, and change the volume. It's a weird choice, and maybe they'll patch it. But yeah, if you do have, like, if you really want to save scum, and you have some sort of critical thing, and you haven't auto-saved, because it auto-saves by default or every 5 days, you could just, like, Alt F4, but as a, I'm not going to be doing that. Hopefully. Hopefully. So another thing you can see is the eclipse is coming. You can see it has polluted the forecast bar there. And it's coming in 3 days. So, Roselap is delirious from a lack of sleep, and her fear has not really come down that much, but it's also not really critical either. It's too bad that the light radius information is so critically important, because the game is sort of gloriously beautiful in its own low poly pixelated way. Or maybe not low poly, but cartoonish way, like Don't Starve. Or like, this is pretty aesthetically pleasing as far as I'm concerned. Like, the art direction and everything is very choice. But this overlay is so important to know about, especially when you have like beacons and everything set up. All right, so we do have room for another member. So I'm going to build yet another tent. And then we have employment opportunities for one more person. So I'm going to build another Hunter's Hall. And one thing that you can note, apart from the Explorer platform, everything that I've been building has been within the light radius of the outer circle. So that when people are sawing their boards, they're at least a little bit illuminated, more so than ambient, so on and so forth. This helps for fear as well, because their fear will start dropping, and because they spend so much time sawing boards or, that kind of thing, it really helps to keep things lit all the time. Light is your friend. There's also not a concept of terrain blocking. So having a wall of workplace facilities, as you, I'm sure, have been able to see, people easily fit through. There's no concept of like pathing or blocking. People can walk past like a wall of workplaces. Ooh, that was a good exploration. Look at that. Look at that chunk. That's a little chunk that we didn't know about before. Good job, Explorer. Here is the impending eclipse. Yoda looks pretty frightened, doesn't he? What about the yellow stuff in the east? The mushrooms? We were planning on saving our stone for tinkeries. And also it is worth mentioning, during the eclipse, that area won't be illuminated, so setting up workplace collection sites for it would be a poor investment right now, because in about a day and a half, there is no sun. So here's a case where this member, as you can see, it's freaking them out, is in the dark. And anytime you're in the dark, you do run the risk of the dark swallowing you up. So if we take a look at the light radius, it's because the explorer's camp is not illuminated, and he has to traverse back into town to become illuminated. So the question I have for you guys is, should I set the night horn alarm for 1 hour earlier? So what that would do is it would restrict the working hours for It basically calls everyone back towards sources of light. I say sources of light and not just the center fire, because if you have beacons, it also calls them towards the beacons. But it calls them towards the beacons an hour earlier, so it will limit the working hours, potentially, that you have. But the benefit is people might not have to spend as much time in the dark. So, those are the choices that I leave with you up top. And now you can also see the duration of the crisis event. The forecast bar shows the duration of the eclipse. So it isn't like a one-day eclipse, as you could probably tell by now. So here we go. I did say I would check back on the Stone Pit workers. Whoa's fear has dropped 14 points. So a very effective change for the better. Because the health and sanity of your community members is really just a summary of each individual. Unlike a lot of games, which will just have like a general summary where everybody has the same feelings about everything, a lot of colony builders will do that. It will just be like the worker class, or the miners, or the woodcutters, and it will just generalize all of it. And in this game, each individual is their own individual with their own individual needs, and you could definitely leave people behind if you neglect them and don't manage them, where then they become they might die or become some sort of liability to your group. We are setting the night horn alarm to blow an hour earlier now. Thank you for tuning in to The Tribe Must Survive, which originally streamed live on Twitch February 22nd. If you have any questions or feedback for me, let me know in the comments below, but please keep in mind that I've asked for no spoilers or backseating. It is important that the viewers do not have this game spoiled for them. If you would like to catch a live stream of mine, Rhadamant.com has my stream schedule and countdown timers to upcoming streams. If you would like to join my online gaming community on Discord, Rhadamant.com has a link to it, as does the description of this video. Thank you so very much for watching, and a special thank you to my Patreon patrons, Twitch subscribers, and viewers like you that support the channel and made it all the way to the credits. Thank you so very much. Hope to catch you in next episode or an upcoming stream. Farewell, my fellow tribe members.